You wake up and everything looks normal. The room, the phone, the routine. But underneath that normal surface, there's a quiet panic you don't talk about. A feeling that something is off. Not broken enough to panic, not painful enough to scream, just heavy enough to follow you everywhere. You go through the motions, but inside, you feel unfinished, directionless, like life is happening around you instead of being built by you. This is the part nobody posts about. The silent anxiety of not knowing where you're going, the exhaustion of doing things that don't mean anything to you. You're busy, but you're not fulfilled. Productive, but not proud. And the scariest part isn't failure. It's the sense that you're wasting time you can never get back. You tell yourself it's fine, that everyone feels this way, that someday clarity will arrive on its own. But days turn into months. Months turn into years, and the feeling doesn't leave. It grows quieter, deeper, heavier. You start numbing it, scrolling, distracting, settling, because facing it would require honesty, and honesty would demand change. Here's the truth most people avoid. Motivation won't save you. Inspiration won't fix this. Waiting won't make it clearer. Direction is not a luxury. It's not a passion project. It's survival. Without direction, your confidence erodes, your energy leaks, your self-respect fades quietly, day by day, decision by decision. You don't need to have everything figured out, but you do need to choose something to stand for. Because when you don't decide who you're becoming, the world decides for you. Comfort replaces growth. Noise replaces meaning. And you slowly forget what it feels like to move with purpose. But this moment matters, because awareness changes everything. The fact that you feel this tension means you're not asleep. It means there's still a part of you that wants more. Not more stuff, more alignment, more intention, more truth. A directed life doesn't begin with answers. It begins with a refusal to keep drifting, a refusal to keep betraying yourself, a refusal to live on autopilot just because it's easier. Direction isn't about having a perfect plan. It's about reclaiming authorship over your own life. This audiobook is not here to hype you up. It's here to ground you, to strip away illusions, to help you build something solid beneath your feet. Because when you have direction, anxiety loses its grip. Comparison fades. Confidence grows quietly from the inside out. You don't need to escape your life. You need to aim it. And once you understand that, the panic starts turning into something else, something sharper, something stronger, something that pulls you forward instead of holding you back. Chapter 1, Why You Feel Lost, Even When Nothing Is Wrong. You don't need a dramatic breakdown to feel lost. Sometimes the most unsettling confusion is the kind that appears while your life looks perfectly fine from the outside. You're doing what you're supposed to do. You're meeting expectations. You're checking boxes. Yet something inside you feels disconnected, as if you're walking through a life that fits your schedule, but not your soul. That quiet misalignment is not failure. It's the first sign that you're waking up. Feeling lost doesn't always come from chaos. Sometimes it comes from too much comfort. The familiar routines, the predictable days, the scrolling, the small talk, the safe choices, everything smooths out into a dull blur. Nothing feels urgent, but nothing feels meaningful either. You begin drifting, not because you're broken, but because you've stopped choosing. And drifting always feels peaceful at first, until you realize you're moving nowhere. People assume that being lost is a dramatic collapse, but the truth is far more subtle. You lose your direction long before you notice. It happens when you stop listening to yourself, when you start shaping your identity around what earns approval, when your decisions come from fear of judgment instead of desire for truth. You slowly move away from your own internal compass, and one day you wake up wondering why your life feels like a costume you never meant to wear. Comfort can be dangerous because it masks emptiness. You tell yourself you should be grateful. You tell yourself others have it worse. You tell yourself you shouldn't complain. But gratitude doesn't replace meaning, and pretending everything is fine doesn't create direction. You can have a stable life and still feel spiritually starved. You can be surrounded by people and still feel painfully alone with yourself. Losing direction is not about lacking blessings. It's about lacking alignment. Convenience plays its part too. Modern life removes friction, but friction is where purpose is forged. You don't have to struggle to find food, or walk miles to reach someone, or fight through silence to confront your thoughts. Everything is immediate, everything is easy, and in that ease, you forget how to hear your deeper instincts. Noise replaces nuance. Stimulation replaces intention. Convenience gives you comfort, but it also steals your clarity. And then there is validation, the sweetest poison. You learn to chase approval without realizing how addictive it becomes. You talk the way others expect. You choose goals that earn applause. You filter your personality to fit whatever room you're in. Each compliment feels like confirmation that you're on the right path. But external validation is a dangerous compass. It points everywhere except toward yourself. Eventually, you realize you've built a life that impresses everyone except you. This is where the quiet panic begins. You sense something missing, but you can't name it. You feel pulled to something deeper, but you don't know where it leads. It feels like failure, but it's actually awareness. Most people sleepwalk through their days, numb to the truth that their life lacks direction. The moment you feel lost is the moment you stop sleepwalking. Confusion is the mind's alarm clock. Feeling lost, ironically, means you're finally paying attention. It means the surface-level life no longer satisfies you. It means you're starting to crave depth, truth, purpose. The emptiness you feel is not a flaw, it's a message. A whisper from the part of you that refuses to settle. A warning from the part of you that knows you're capable of something more than habit and convenience. You are not lost because you lack your potential. You are lost because you stopped exploring it. You are not lost because you made wrong decisions. You are lost because you stopped making intentional ones. When you drift, every path feels foggy. When you choose, even uncertainty feels like progress. Direction doesn't come from perfect clarity. It comes from commitment. Commitment to movement, to growth, to truth. You feel lost because you're standing between two versions of yourself. The one who obeys expectation and the one who seeks meaning. The one who stays safe and the one who steps forward. You can feel the tension between them every day, the urge to change versus the fear of choosing. That tension is not a defect. It's evidence of evolution. You're not broken, you're transitioning. So many people confuse confusion with weakness. They believe if they were stronger, they'd know exactly what to do. But strength isn't the absence of confusion. Strength is choosing movement despite confusion. Direction is not something you wait for. It's something you create, choice by choice, standard by standard. You don't need a map. You need a decision to stop drifting and start directing. There is a version of you who knows what matters, a version who feels more alive when they take responsibility instead of avoiding it, a version who moves with intention instead of habit. That version is calling you forward. That's why you feel restless. That's why the comfort you used to tolerate now feels suffocating. Growth is trying to pull you up, but you're still clinging to what keeps you neutral. The feeling of being lost is your mind refusing to accept a life without meaning. It's your instincts screaming that you were built for something deeper than convenience. It's the death of autopilot and the birth of self-direction. Once you honor that feeling instead of fearing it, everything changes. You stop interpreting the fog as failure. You start interpreting it as invitation. And you realize that being lost is not the end of your path. It's the beginning of your purpose. Because feeling lost is not a sign that you're behind. It's a sign that you have outgrown the life you're in. It's a signal that your next chapter requires a new level of truth, courage, and responsibility. You're not failing, you're awakening. And from this awakening, real direction begins to emerge. Not from the outside, from within. Chapter 2, The Cost of Living Without Direction. At first, a directionless life doesn't look dangerous. It looks easy, comfortable. You wake up without pressure, without urgency, without a clear demand on your energy. Nothing is technically wrong, and that's exactly why it lasts so long. Because the damage isn't loud. It's quiet. It doesn't break you all at once. It erodes you slowly, invisibly, while you tell yourself you still have time. The first cost is anxiety, not the dramatic kind, the low-grade background anxiety that never fully shuts off. It shows up when you're alone, when the noise stops, when there's nothing to distract you from the truth that you don't know where you're going. Your mind keeps searching for a threat because uncertainty feels like danger. Without direction, your nervous system never rests. It's always waiting for clarity that never comes. Then comes comparison. When you don't have your own direction, you borrow other people's. You measure yourself against timelines that were never meant for you. Someone else's success feels like an accusation. Someone else's confidence feels like proof that you're behind. You scroll, you watch, you judge yourself silently, and every comparison drains a little more belief from your system. Resentment follows closely behind. You start resenting people who seem certain, people who move with purpose, people who commit fully. You tell yourself they're lucky, privileged, different. But underneath that story is pain, because deep down you know the difference isn't talent, it's direction. And resentment grows when you avoid taking responsibility for your own path. There is also the cost of quiet self-betrayal. This one hurts the most because it's personal. You feel it when you say yes to things you don't respect, when you stay silent instead of honest, when you waste time you promised yourself you'd use better. Each small betrayal feels insignificant in the moment, but over time, they stack. And the person you lose trust in is yourself. A directionless life teaches you to numb instead of act. You distract instead of decide. You scroll instead of build. You consume instead of create. Distraction feels harmless, but it's not neutral. It's decay disguised as entertainment. Every hour you use to avoid your discomfort strengthens the habit of avoidance. And habits shape identity. Comfort is the most expensive currency you'll ever spend. In the short term, it feels like relief. You avoid risk. You avoid discomfort. You avoid responsibility. But comfort always sends the bill later. It shows up as regret, as restlessness, as the haunting question of who you could have been if you had acted sooner. You don't feel the weight of wasted time until it's behind you. You don't notice decay while it's happening. But one day you wake up and realize you've been living on pause. Years passed, energy faded, opportunities narrowed, and suddenly change feels harder than it ever needed to be. That's the real cost of avoidance. It compounds. A life without direction also weakens your confidence. Confidence doesn't come from positive thinking. It comes from evidence, from keeping promises to yourself, from consistent action aligned with values. Without direction, your actions scatter. And when your actions scatter, your self-trust collapses. You stop believing in your own follow-through. Without direction, even success feels empty. You can achieve things and still feel hollow. You can check boxes and still feel disconnected. Because achievement without alignment doesn't feed the soul. It only feeds the ego. And the ego is never satisfied. Direction is what gives success meaning. Without it, everything feels temporary. What makes this dangerous is that nothing forces you to stop. There's no alarm, no collapse, no obvious breaking point. You can drift for decades, and society will reward you for it. You'll be called stable, reasonable, normal. But inside, you'll feel the slow suffocation of unrealized potential. Avoidance feels safer than change, but avoidance has a longer memory. It keeps score. Every time you choose comfort over courage, it remembers. And it reminds you at night, in moments of stillness, in the quiet sense that you're capable of more, but refusing to step into it. Change is uncomfortable, but it's honest. It demands effort, but it gives back clarity. Avoidance feels gentle, but it steals your future. And the truth is this, the pain of staying the same always outweighs the pain of growth. One hurts your comfort, the other hurts your identity. Direction doesn't eliminate fear. It gives fear a reason. It turns anxiety into energy. It turns confusion into movement. A hard life with direction feels meaningful. An easy life without it feels empty. That's the trade no one warns you about. You are paying a cost whether you choose or not. The only difference is whether you're paying with effort now or regret later. Drift has a price, and you've already been paying it. This is the moment of choice, not tomorrow, not when things feel clearer. Now, you can continue floating, letting time decide for you, or you can take responsibility for where your life is headed. Direction doesn't arrive when you're ready. It appears when you decide you're done drifting. And once you see the cost clearly, avoidance stops looking safe. It starts looking expensive. Chapter 3. Stop searching, start building. You've been searching for something you believe is missing. A sign, a calling, a moment of clarity that suddenly makes everything make sense. You tell yourself that once you find it, everything will click. The confusion will fade, the motivation will arrive. But the truth is uncomfortable and freeing at the same time. Purpose is not found, it's built. Searching feels productive, but it's often just disguised hesitation. You read, you watch, you think, you plan, you imagine a future version of yourself who finally knows what to do. And in that imagination, everything feels clean and certain. But imagination without execution becomes a trap. It keeps you mentally busy while your life stays the same. Waiting feels responsible. Overthinking feels intelligent. But neither creates direction. They delay it. You don't build a meaningful life by standing still and hoping clarity arrives. Clarity comes after movement, not before it. Direction sharpens through friction, through effort, through choosing something and committing to it long enough to be shaped by it. The idea that purpose is discovered somewhere out there keeps you passive. It turns life into a scavenger hunt instead of a construction site. You start believing that if you just travel more, think harder, or wait longer, the answer will reveal itself. But most people who live meaningful lives didn't stumble into purpose. They built it brick by brick long before it felt inspiring. Purpose grows from responsibility, from showing up when it's inconvenient, from doing work that doesn't feel magical at first, from choosing effort over comfort. Meaning doesn't appear when conditions are perfect. It appears when you commit to something imperfect and give it your energy anyway. Fantasy thinking tells you that purpose should feel obvious, that it should excite you instantly, that it should remove doubt. But real direction often feels heavy before it feels fulfilling. It feels uncertain before it feels aligned. It demands discipline before it gives confidence. That's how you know it's real. Building requires friction, and friction is exactly what searching avoids. When you build, you are forced to confront your weaknesses, your impatience, your excuses, your fear of failure. Searching lets you stay safe. Building forces you to grow. And growth is uncomfortable by design. You don't need to know the final destination. You need to choose a direction that demands something from you, something that requires effort, something that makes you better through repetition. Purpose is not about passion alone. It's about commitment. Passion fades. Commitment transforms. The moment you stop searching and start building, your identity shifts. You move from observer to participant, from consumer to creator, from someone waiting for life to happen to someone shaping it. That shift alone creates clarity, because action organizes the mind. Direction is constructed through standards, through daily choices, through the decision to take responsibility for your time and energy. You don't build meaning by chasing feelings. You build it by building skills, habits, and character. Meaning is the byproduct of becoming useful, disciplined, and aligned. You may be afraid of choosing the wrong thing, but the truth is this: indecision is more damaging than imperfect action. A wrong direction teaches you more than no direction at all. Movement creates feedback. Feedback creates refinement. Refinement creates clarity. Purpose doesn't require certainty, it requires courage. Courage to begin without guarantees. Courage to stay when it gets difficult. Courage to invest effort before you see results. Most people never build meaning because they want proof before commitment. But proof comes after commitment, not before it. When you build, you create momentum. Momentum silences doubt. Momentum quiets anxiety. Momentum replaces overthinking with experience. The mind stops spinning when the body moves. Action grounds you in reality. Searching keeps you trapped in abstraction. Building also creates self-respect. Every day you show up, you prove something to yourself. Not to the world, to yourself. And that proof compounds. Confidence grows quietly through evidence, not affirmations. You start trusting yourself because you see yourself following through. Direction is not a single decision. It's a series of small, aligned actions repeated consistently. You don't wake up one day with purpose fully formed. You wake up one day realizing you have built something meaningful through discipline and persistence. Stop asking what you're meant to do and start asking what you're willing to commit to. What are you willing to struggle for? What are you willing to sacrifice comfort for? What are you willing to work on even when no one is watching? The answers to those questions point toward real direction. You don't need a perfect vision. You need a work ethic. You don't need constant inspiration. You need structure. You don't need to search endlessly. You need to build patiently. Meaning grows where effort is consistent. Every day you delay building, you reinforce the habit of waiting. Every day you act, you reinforce the identity of someone who takes responsibility. One path weakens you, the other strengthens you, and the choice is available every single day. Stop romanticizing discovery. Start respecting construction. Purpose is not revealed in a moment of insight. It is forged through commitment over time. And once you accept that, confusion begins to dissolve. Because you're no longer waiting for direction. You're creating it. This is where clarity begins. Not in answers, but in action. Not in searching, but in building. Chapter 4, Identity Before Purpose. Before direction becomes action, it becomes identity. Most people think they're lost because they lack a plan, a strategy, or a clear goal. But that's not the real problem. The real problem is that they're trying to build a meaningful life on an unstable sense of self, and without a strong identity, no plan survives pressure. If you don't know who you are becoming, every decision feels heavy. Every option feels risky. Every obstacle feels personal. Hoping the right answer will save you from uncertainty. But purpose doesn't begin with doing. It begins with being. With deciding who you are, regardless of mood, motivation, or circumstances. Weak identities are built on feelings, on motivation, on external validation. You act when you feel inspired. You quit when you feel tired. You push forward when it feels good and retreat when it doesn't. That kind of identity is fragile. It collapses under stress. It disappears the moment discomfort arrives. Strong identities are built on standards, on values, on commitments that don't change just because emotions fluctuate. That question changes everything. It turns discipline into self-respect. It turns consistency into character. When identity is unclear, purpose feels confusing. You chase goals that don't fit you. You imitate paths that don't align with your values. You copy other people's definitions of success and wonder why they don't satisfy you. But when identity is clear, direction becomes simpler. Not easier, but clearer. You don't rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your identity. If you see yourself as someone who avoids discomfort, you will avoid the very actions that create meaning. If you see yourself as someone who follows through, you will act even when it's hard. Identity dictates behavior long before motivation ever shows up. Most people are waiting for confidence to act. But confidence is not a prerequisite. It's a byproduct. You build confidence by behaving like the kind of person you respect. You earn it through action aligned with values. And values are chosen, not discovered. Ask yourself this honestly. Who do you become when no one is watching? When there's no reward, no praise, no immediate payoff? That version of you is your real identity. And if you don't like that answer, that's not a reason for shame. It's a starting point for change. Identity is not fixed. It's trained. It's reinforced through repetition. Every time you act in alignment with your values, you strengthen that identity. Every time you betray them, you weaken it. Purpose doesn't demand perfection. It demands alignment. Stop asking what path will make you happy. Start asking what kind of person you are willing to become. A person who tells the truth. A person who keeps promises. A person who chooses effort over excuses. Purpose grows naturally out of that soil. When you focus only on strategy, you constantly adjust. You change plans. You doubt yourself. You second-guess every move. But when you focus on identity, you become stable. Strategies can fail without breaking you. Obstacles become information instead of threats. You stay grounded because your direction comes from within. A values-based identity gives you an internal compass. You no longer need constant reassurance. You don't need to compare yourself to others. You measure yourself by your own standards. That's where real confidence comes from. Quiet, unshakable, earned. You are becoming the kind of person who does hard things even when they don't feel good. You are becoming the kind of person who chooses long-term meaning over short-term comfort. You are becoming someone who acts with intention instead of impulse. Say it, repeat it, live it. Identity turns discipline into expression. You don't wake up forcing yourself to act. You wake up acting because it's who you are. That shift removes friction. It removes internal negotiation. You stop arguing with yourself every morning. You simply move. This is why identity must come before purpose. Purpose without identity collapses under pressure. Identity without purpose evolves into purpose. When you become solid internally, direction forms externally. You don't need to find yourself. You need to build yourself. Brick by brick, choice by choice, standard by standard. And once that foundation is set, action stops feeling scattered. It starts feeling inevitable. And that question always has an answer. This is where discipline begins to feel natural. This is where meaning starts to take root. Not in grand plans, but in daily alignment. You are not chasing purpose anymore. You are embodying it. And once identity is clear, the next step is unavoidable. Because a strong identity demands action. It demands structure. It demands consistency. And that is where direction becomes real. Chapter 5, Choosing a Direction and Ending the Paralysis. Overthinking doesn't come from intelligence, it comes from fear. Fear of choosing wrong, fear of wasting time, fear of committing to something and discovering later that it wasn't perfect. So you pause, you analyze, you weigh every option endlessly, and the longer you wait, the heavier the decision feels. Paralysis disguises itself as preparation, but it's still paralysis. You tell yourself you're being careful, responsible, strategic, but deep down you know the truth. You're stuck, not because you lack options, but because you're afraid of closing doors. Choosing one path means letting others go, and that finality feels dangerous. So you stay in the middle, safe, neutral, motionless. But neutrality has a cost. Every day you don't choose, time chooses for you. Circumstances harden. Energy fades. Opportunities narrow. The window doesn't stay open forever. Stagnation feels calm on the surface, but underneath, it breeds anxiety. Your mind stays busy because your life isn't moving. You've been taught to wait for certainty, to wait until you feel ready, to wait until you're shishtaman. But certainty is not a requirement for progress. It's a reward for action. You don't gain clarity by thinking harder. You gain it by moving forward and adjusting along the way. Direction sharpens through motion. When you act, reality responds. You get feedback, resistance, information. That feedback refines you. It tells you what fits and what doesn't. Planning alone can't give you that. Only movement can. Imperfect action beats perfect intention every time. A flawed step forward teaches you more than 1,000 imagined futures. Progress doesn't demand confidence. It creates it. You don't need to believe fully in your choice. You need to commit to learning from it. Fear of the wrong choice assumes there is one correct path and everything else is failure. But life doesn't work that way. Most directions can become meaningful if you bring discipline, responsibility, and effort into them. Meaning is not fragile. It adapts to the path you walk. Waiting feels safer than choosing, but it keeps you weak. Choosing feels risky, but it makes you stronger. Strength comes from carrying responsibility, not avoiding it. Every decision you own builds a self-trust. Every decision you avoid erodes it. You don't need guarantees. You need courage. Courage to commit for long enough to see what unfolds. Courage to stop living in hypothetical futures and start engaging with the real one. Overthinking is often just delayed self-trust. You don't trust yourself to adapt, to recover, to pivot if needed. but you are more resilient than you think. You don't need to get it right the first time. You need to stay in motion long enough to grow. When you choose a direction, something surprising happens. The mental noise quiets. The endless internal debate fades. Not because everything is solved, but because energy is finally being used. Movement organizes the mind. Action reduces anxiety. Stillness amplifies it. Relief doesn't come from certainty, it comes from commitment. The moment you choose, even imperfectly, you feel lighter because you're no longer carrying every possible future. You're carrying one direction, and that is manageable. Direction is not a prison, it's a container. It gives your energy somewhere to go. Without it, effort spills everywhere and accomplishes nothing. With it, even small actions accumulate into something solid. You are allowed to choose without guarantees. You are allowed to adjust later. You are allowed to change your mind with wisdom, not panic. Choosing now does not trap you forever. It frees you from paralysis. Stop waiting for the fear to disappear. It won't. Fear follows responsibility. The difference is whether fear controls you or sharpens you. When you act despite fear, fear loses its authority. Progress requires decision. Not the perfect one. The next one. The one that moves you forward instead of keeping you stuck. You don't need to see the entire path. You need to take the next step with intention. Every life you admire was built through imperfect choices sustained over time. No one had it all figured out. They just chose, learned, adjusted, and continued. That is the formula. Simple, not easy, but effective. You end paralysis by accepting that mistakes are part of movement. You end overthinking by valuing experience over speculation. You end stagnation by deciding that progress matters more than comfort. This is permission to choose without knowing, permission to move without certainty, permission to stop rehearsing your life and start living it. Once you choose, momentum begins, and momentum changes everything. Chapter 6, The Discipline That Creates Meaning. Discipline is not the enemy you were taught to fear. It is not punishment. It is not rigidity. It is not a cage that removes joy from your life. Discipline is freedom misunderstood. And until you see it clearly, meaning will always feel just out of reach. A chaotic life feels flexible, but it's fragile. You wake up reacting instead of deciding. Your time gets pulled in every direction. Your energy leaks into distractions, impulses, and unfinished intentions. You tell yourself you value freedom, but deep down you feel scattered, unstable, at the mercy of whatever demands your attention next. Chaos promises freedom, but it delivers exhaustion. Discipline does the opposite. It looks restrictive from the outside, but it creates space on the inside. When your days have structure, your mind has room to breathe. When your habits are intentional, your energy stops bleeding out. Discipline removes decision fatigue. It replaces constant negotiation with clarity. You no longer ask yourself what you should do next. You already know. Most people associate discipline with force, with pushing, with suffering. But real discipline is alignment. It's choosing actions that support the life you want instead of sabotaging it. It's saying no to impulses that feel good now but cost you later. It's saying yes to actions that feel hard now but pay you back with confidence, stability, and self-respect. Meaning does not live in big ideas alone. It lives in repetition, in daily behaviors, in what you do when motivation is low and no one is watching. Purpose without discipline stays abstract. It remains a concept instead of becoming a lived experience. Discipline is what turns intention into identity. Without structure, your goals compete with your moods. Some days you feel focused, other days you feel tired, and your output rises and falls with how you feel. That instability erodes trust in yourself. You start believing you can't rely on your own effort. Discipline removes emotion from the equation. It builds consistency, and consistency builds meaning. A disciplined day doesn't need to be perfect. It needs to be deliberate. Simple routines, clear priorities, non-negotiables that anchor you. When you design your days instead of drifting through them, your life gains direction automatically. You don't have to search for purpose. You live it through your actions. Impulse feels exciting, but it's shallow. Intention feels boring at first, but it's powerful. Impulse reacts. Intention leads. Impulse follows the loudest urge. Intention follows values. When you act on impulse, you feel briefly alive, then empty. When you act with intention, fulfillment builds quietly over time. Discipline trains your nervous system. It teaches you that discomfort is survivable, that resistance is temporary, that you don't need to escape every hard feeling. This training changes how you experience life. Anxiety loses its grip because your body learns that action is possible even when emotions are uncomfortable. A structured life doesn't limit creativity. It protects it. When your basics are handled, your mind is free to think deeper. When your energy isn't wasted on chaos, you can invest it into growth. Discipline creates a foundation, and everything meaningful needs a foundation. You don't need extreme routines. You need consistent ones. Wake times, work blocks, movement, reflection, sleep. These are not boring details. They are the architecture of meaning. Ignore them and your life feels unstable. Respect them and everything becomes easier to carry. Discipline also builds trust. Every time you follow through, you send a signal to yourself. I can rely on me. That signal changes how you show up. You stop overpromising. You stop doubting your capacity. You move with quiet confidence because your actions back you up. Most people wait for motivation to discipline themselves, but discipline creates motivation. Action creates energy. Momentum creates belief. You don't wake up motivated, you become motivated by moving. Discipline is the spark that starts the engine. Meaningful lives are not built on intensity. They are built on rhythm, showing up again and again and again, even when it's mundane, especially when it's mundane. That repetition carves depth into your character. When discipline becomes part of your identity, life simplifies. You don't argue with yourself. You don't negotiate with excuses. You act because it's who you are. That identity removes friction. And with less friction, progress accelerates. You start to experience a different kind of freedom. Not the freedom to do whatever you want, whenever you want, but the freedom to trust yourself, the freedom to commit, the freedom to build something that lasts. Discipline also creates boundaries. It teaches you to protect your time, to say no without guilt, to prioritize what matters. Boundaries are not selfish. They are necessary for meaning. Without them, everything important gets diluted. The days you don't feel like showing up are the days that matter most. Anyone can act when it feels good. Discipline is revealed when it doesn't. Those moments forge identity. They separate intention from reality. Purpose stops feeling vague when discipline enters the picture. It stops being something you talk about and becomes something you practice. Meaning is no longer an idea in your head. It's a pattern in your life. You don't need more information. You need execution. You don't need more inspiration. You need structure. Discipline is the bridge between who you are and who you're becoming. When your days are disciplined, your life feels coherent. Things connect. Effort compounds. You stop feeling scattered. You start feeling grounded. That grounding is peace. Discipline is not about control. It's about alignment. Aligning your actions with your values. Aligning your time with your priorities. Aligning your effort with your future. And once discipline is in place, meaning stops being fragile. It becomes stable, repeatable, real. This is where intention becomes execution. And execution changes everything. Chapter 7, Responsibility is the shortcut. Responsibility is the word most people avoid when they feel lost. It sounds heavy, demanding, unforgiving. You've been told it means pressure, blame, and restriction, but responsibility is not a burden. It's a shortcut. And once you understand that, everything begins to stabilize. When life feels unclear, the instinct is to look outward, to blame circumstances, timing, other people, your past, the economy, your upbringing. Blame feels relieving in the moment because it removes the weight from your shoulders, but it also removes your power. The more you explain your situation away, the less capable you feel of changing it. Blame creates motion without movement. You talk, you analyze, You vent, but nothing changes. Responsibility does the opposite. It's uncomfortable at first because it places the weight back where it belongs, on you. But that weight builds strength, and strength creates direction. The moment you take responsibility, your mind changes posture. You stop asking who's at fault and start asking what can be done. That shift is subtle, but it's powerful. Problems become solvable. Obstacles become information. You stop waiting for permission to act. Responsibility is grounding. It anchors you in reality. When you own your outcomes, you reclaim authorship over your life. You stop feeling like a passenger. You become the driver. And even if the road is rough, being in control feels better than being carried. Avoiding responsibility keeps you weak. It keeps you reactive. Every inconvenience feels personal. Every setback feels unfair. You spend your energy managing frustration instead of building progress. Responsibility redirects that energy. It turns frustration into fuel. Taking responsibility doesn't mean blaming yourself for everything. It means recognizing that regardless of how things happen, you are responsible for what happens next. That truth is freeing. It means your future is not locked by your past. At first, responsibility feels heavy because you've been avoiding it. Like any unused muscle, it aches when activated. But with repetition, it strengthens. And as it strengthens, something unexpected happens. Your confidence grows. Confidence is not loud. It's not performative. It's quiet certainty. It comes from knowing that whatever happens, you will respond with effort instead of excuses. Responsibility gives you that certainty. It tells you that you don't need perfect conditions to move forward. A directionless life feels unstable because nothing is owned. Everything is conditional. Mood-dependent, circumstance-driven. Responsibility stabilizes you because it removes dependency. You stop waiting for motivation. You act because it's required. When you own your actions, you begin to trust yourself. Self-trust doesn't come from success alone. It comes from reliability, from doing what you said you would do, from facing what you'd rather avoid. Responsibility is the practice of self-respect. Most people want clarity before responsibility, but responsibility creates clarity. When you take ownership, priorities emerge. Time sharpens. Focus improves. Direction appears not as a feeling, but as a response to what matters. Responsibility also simplifies life. You stop carrying resentment. You stop replaying stories about how things should have been. You deal with what is. That realism is calming. It reduces mental noise. It grounds you in action. Even when it's unfair, even when it's difficult, that sentence returns control to you. It removes helplessness. It replaces it with agency. Responsibility builds resilience. When setbacks happen, you don't collapse. You adapt, you adjust, you keep moving. Because your identity is no longer built on outcomes, it's built on ownership. You begin to feel capable again. Not because life becomes easy, but because you stop avoiding difficulty. You meet it head on, and each time you do, you reinforce the belief that you can handle more than you thought. Direction strengthens when responsibility becomes your default response. Instead of asking what's wrong, you ask what's required. Instead of complaining, you act. That consistency creates momentum. Momentum creates confidence. Confidence creates stability. A responsible life feels heavier at first, but lighter over time. An irresponsible life feels light at first, but heavier later. One builds strength, the other builds regret. The difference compounds daily. When you take responsibility, excuses lose their power. You stop negotiating with weakness. You stop waiting for the perfect mood. You do what needs to be done because it aligns with who you are becoming. Responsibility also creates respect. From others, yes, but more importantly, from yourself. You stop seeing yourself as someone who avoids hard things. You start seeing yourself as someone who faces them. That shift changes how you carry yourself, how you speak, how you decide. You move with more intention, more clarity, more calm. Direction feels less forced and more natural. This is why responsibility is the shortcut. It bypasses confusion. It bypasses waiting. It bypasses motivation. It goes straight to action. And action is where change lives. You don't need to control everything. You need to own what's yours. Your effort, your choices, your standards. When you do that, life stops feeling chaotic. It starts feeling navigable. The more responsibility you take, the stronger you feel. The stronger you feel, the clearer your direction becomes. Not because everything is easy, but because you know you can handle what comes next. This is where you stop drifting. Not because the world changes, but because you do. You stop asking for life to make sense. You make sense of it through action. Responsibility doesn't limit you, it anchors you. And from that anchor, real direction emerges. Chapter 8. Cutting distractions that steal your life. Distraction is not harmless. It is not neutral. It is not just a way to relax. Distraction is a slow theft of your attention, your energy, and ultimately, your life. And because it feels easy, familiar, and socially accepted, most people never fight it. They surrender to it quietly, 1 hour at a time. Modern distractions are designed to feel irresistible. Endless feeds, constant notifications, infinite entertainment. Your brain is pulled in 1,000 directions before you've even chosen one. Noise replaces silence. Stimulation replaces thought. And without realizing it, you lose the ability to sit with yourself long enough to hear what actually matters. Distraction promises relief from discomfort, from boredom, from uncertainty, from the quiet tension of not knowing where you're going. It gives you an escape, but escape is not freedom. It's avoidance. And avoidance always comes with a cost. When you distract yourself, you postpone growth. You delay clarity, you numb the very signals that are trying to guide you. Restlessness, dissatisfaction, curiosity. These feelings are not problems to eliminate. They are messages. Distraction silences them before they can do their job. Shallow stimulation feels good quickly and disappears just as fast. You scroll, you watch, you consume, and afterward, you feel emptier than before. Not because you did something wrong, but because your mind was fed noise instead of nourishment. Deep fulfillment works differently. It requires focus, engagement, presence, and those qualities cannot coexist with constant distraction. A distracted life feels busy but hollow. Your days fill up, but nothing accumulates. You end the day tired without knowing why, exhausted without having built anything meaningful. Distraction drains energy without producing value. Attention is your most valuable resource, more valuable than time. Because where your attention goes, your life follows. If your attention is constantly fractured, your life feels scattered. If your attention is protected, your life begins to feel intentional. Most people try to fix their lives without fixing their environment. They try to think clearly while living in constant noise. They try to build discipline while surrounding themselves with temptation. That battle is exhausting and unnecessary. Environment shapes behavior more than willpower ever will. Cutting distractions is not about becoming extreme or disconnected. It's about becoming deliberate. It's about deciding what deserves access to your mind. You don't owe your attention to everything that demands it. You owe it to what matters. Distraction keeps you reactive. You respond to whatever appears next. A message, a notification, a headline. Your mind never settles long enough to move forward with purpose. Engagement, on the other hand, is active. It's chosen, it's focused, and it creates depth. When you remove distractions, discomfort surfaces. Silence feels loud at first. Boredom creeps in. Restlessness rises. This is the moment most people quit. But this discomfort is not a sign you're doing something wrong. It's a sign you're finally present. Presence is where clarity lives. When the noise fades, your thoughts organize. Your priorities reveal themselves. You start to feel the difference between what entertains you and what fulfills you. That awareness is powerful and dangerous to the distractions that feed on your attention. Endless consumption trains you to expect constant stimulation. It weakens your ability to focus deeply, to work patiently, to sit with difficulty. Cutting distractions retrains your mind. It rebuilds your capacity for sustained effort. And sustained effort is where meaning is built. Escape feels easier than engagement, but engagement is where growth happens. Escape avoids reality. Engagement shapes it. One keeps you comfortable, the other makes you capable, and capability creates confidence. Protecting your attention is an act of self-respect. That choice is not popular, but it is powerful. You don't need to eliminate everything. You need to be intentional about something. Choose periods of focus. Create boundaries around your time. Design spaces where distraction is minimized and presence is possible. When distractions are reduced, discipline becomes easier. Not because you're stronger, but because temptation is quieter. You stop fighting constant urges. You stop negotiating with impulses. You simply act. This is where internal clarity becomes external control. You stop relying on motivation and start relying on structure. Your environment begins to support your values instead of undermining them. A focused life feels different. Time slows down, work feels deeper, rest feels earned. You become more aware of yourself and less reactive to the world. That awareness builds calm. Distraction steals your life in fragments. It never takes everything at once. It takes 5 minutes here, 10 minutes there, an hour at night, a morning lost to scrolling, and suddenly years have passed. Cutting distractions gives you your life back in pieces too. A quiet morning, a focused hour, an uninterrupted thought. These small moments compound into direction. You don't need to escape your life anymore. You need to engage with it fully. Distraction keeps you on the surface. Focus pulls you into depth. This is the turning point. From inner clarity to external alignment. From reaction to intention. From noise to meaning. What you protect determines what you build. And when you protect your attention, you begin building a life that actually feels like yours. Chapter 9. Building a meaningful daily structure. A meaningful life is not built in dramatic moments. It is built in ordinary days. Quiet mornings, repeated routines, small decisions made consistently. Direction becomes real when it enters your calendar, your habits, your daily structure. Without structure, purpose stays theoretical. With structure, it becomes livable. Most people live reactively. They wake up late, check their phone, respond to whatever is loudest. Their days are shaped by demands, distractions, and moods. They don't choose their time chooses them. And by the end of the day, they feel busy but unfulfilled, exhausted but unsatisfied. An intentional day feels different. It starts with design. You decide how your energy is spent before the world tries to claim it. Structure doesn't remove freedom, it protects it. It ensures that what matters actually happens instead of being crowded out by noise. Mornings matter because they set the tone, not because of some perfect routine, but because the first actions you take signal who's in control. When you begin your day reacting, you train your mind to follow. When you begin deliberately, you train your mind to lead. A meaningful morning doesn't need to be extreme. It needs to be consistent. Wake up at a time you respect. Move your body. Sit in silence. Reflect. Prepare. These actions anchor you. They tell your nervous system that you are present and intentional. Routines remove friction. They eliminate the need to decide every small thing. When actions are automated, energy is saved for what matters. Structure creates momentum. Momentum creates confidence. Confidence reinforces identity. Non-negotiables are the backbone of structure. These are the actions you do regardless of mood, regardless of motivation, regardless of how the day unfolds. They are promises you keep to yourself. And every time you keep them, your self-trust grows. Reactive days are chaotic because they are unowned. Intentional days are calm because they are claimed. You know what matters. You know where your energy goes. You stop negotiating with distractions because your priorities are clear. Structure also creates boundaries. It gives you permission to say no. No to unnecessary meetings. No to endless scrolling. No to commitments that dilute your focus. Boundaries are not limitations. They are guards around meaning. Meaningful structure balances effort and rest. You don't grind endlessly, you work deeply, then recover deliberately. Rest becomes restorative instead of escapist, because it's earned, because it's intentional. When your days have rhythm, your life gains coherence. You stop feeling pulled apart. You stop feeling scattered. Everything connects. Small efforts compound. Progress becomes visible. Structure also reduces anxiety. When you know what you're doing and why, uncertainty shrinks. You don't waste energy deciding what comes next. You move with clarity. Ordinary actions repeated consistently shape extraordinary outcomes. A single focused hour a day becomes hundreds of hours a year. A short daily reflection becomes deep self-awareness. A simple routine becomes a meaningful life. Structure doesn't eliminate spontaneity, it creates space for it. When your foundation is solid, flexibility becomes freedom instead of chaos. You can adapt without losing direction. You don't need to control every minute. You need to anchor your days. Identify what matters most. Protect it. Build around it. Let the rest adjust. A meaningful life is not built by intensity. It is built by reliability. Showing up again and again, especially when it feels ordinary, especially when no one is watching. When structure is aligned with values, discipline feels natural. You're not forcing yourself. You're expressing who you are becoming. That alignment removes resistance. Your days are your life in miniature. How you live today is how you live forever. Structure ensures that today reflects the life you want, not the life you tolerate. Direction stops feeling abstract when it shows up in your schedule, when your time reflects your priorities, when your habits reflect your values. That's when purpose becomes tangible. You don't need perfect days, you need intentional ones. Days where effort aligns with meaning. Days that build something instead of just passing. This is how direction becomes livable, not through grand plans, but through daily structure. Not through motivation, but through design. When your days are built with purpose, your life follows naturally, and the path ahead becomes clearer with every intentional step. Chapter 10. Endurance over inspiration. Inspiration is loud. It arrives with energy, excitement, and a rush of belief. It makes everything feel possible for a moment. But inspiration is unreliable. It comes and goes without warning. And if your life depends on how you feel, your direction will always be unstable. You've been taught to wait for motivation, to wait until you feel ready, to wait until you're inspired enough to act. But inspiration is not a foundation. It's a spark. And sparks burn out quickly if nothing sustains them. Endurance is different. Endurance is quiet. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't feel heroic in the moment. It simply shows up again and again and again. Endurance is what carries you forward when excitement fades and results are invisible. Motivation culture tells you that if you're not excited, you're doing something wrong. That if it feels hard, you're on the wrong path. But that belief is dangerous because everything meaningful becomes difficult once the novelty wears off. Growth always demands persistence past the point of excitement. Emotional highs feel productive, but they are temporary. They lift you up, then drop you back where you started. Consistency works differently. It builds slowly, invisibly, one day at a time, and one day you look back and realize something solid has formed. Endurance teaches you patience. It teaches you to respect the process instead of chasing outcomes. It teaches you that progress doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it hides. Sometimes it shows up weeks later after you've stopped expecting it. Most people quit not because they failed, but because they got bored. Because the work became repetitive. Because the progress slowed. Because the emotional reward disappeared. Endurance is what keeps you moving through that phase. Meaning deepens when you stay. When you don't run at the first sign of discomfort. When you don't abandon effort just because it feels ordinary. Depth is built through repetition, through commitment without applause. That question removes drama. It simplifies action. It shifts focus from emotion to responsibility. When progress is invisible, endurance matters most. Those are the days that shape you. The days where nothing seems to change, but you show up anyway. Those days build character. They build self-trust. They teach you that you can rely on yourself even when motivation disappears. Self-trust doesn't come from success alone. It comes from consistency. From knowing that you won't quit just because it's hard or quiet or slow. Endurance is the practice of proving that to yourself. You don't need to feel inspired to act with purpose. You need to act with purpose to feel fulfilled. The order matters. Action first, feeling later. That reversal changes everything. Endurance also protects you from comparison. When you're focused on staying consistent, you stop watching others. You stop measuring timelines. You stop rushing progress. You move at your pace, anchored by commitment. Excitement burns fast. Resolve burns steady. Resolve is what gets you through long stretches of uncertainty. It's what carries you through doubt. It's what keeps direction intact when emotions fluctuate. A meaningful life is not built by intensity. It's built by reliability. Showing up when it's inconvenient, when it's boring, when it's uncomfortable. Those moments separate fantasy from reality. Endurance makes growth inevitable. Not dramatic, not flashy, but certain. If you stay long enough, effort compounds, skills sharpen, confidence grows, direction strengthens. Most breakthroughs are preceded by long periods of invisibility, work without recognition, effort without feedback. Endurance is what keeps you there long enough to cross that threshold. You are not behind because progress feels slow. You are ahead if you're still showing up. Persistence outlasts talent. Consistency outperforms excitement. When you rely on inspiration, you become reactive. When you rely on endurance, you become stable. Stability creates peace. Peace creates clarity. Clarity reinforces direction. Endurance also builds emotional resilience. You stop being surprised by discomfort. You stop interpreting difficulty as danger. You learn that effort is survivable, that resistance fades, that you can continue. This resilience changes how you see yourself. You stop seeing yourself as someone who needs perfect conditions. You start seeing yourself as someone who adapts, someone who persists, someone who finishes. Endurance is not about pushing endlessly, it's about continuing wisely, resting when needed, adjusting when necessary, but never quitting out of impatience. You don't need to feel inspired every day. You need to feel committed. Commitment anchors you when emotions shift. It keeps your direction steady. A life built on endurance feels different, calmer, stronger, less dramatic, more real. You stop chasing highs and start building depth. Endurance teaches you that meaning is not something you stumble into. It's something you earn through persistence, through staying when it would be easier to leave. This is how self-trust is forged, not through moments of excitement, but through seasons of consistency. When you endure, you become reliable to yourself. And when you trust yourself, direction feels solid. Not because everything is exciting, but because everything is intentional. Inspiration may start the journey, but endurance is what finishes it. Chapter 11. Outgrowing who you used to be. Growth always costs more than people admit. Not in effort alone, but in identity, in comfort, in familiarity, in versions of yourself you once relied on to feel safe. Outgrowing who you used to be is not dramatic at first. It's quiet, it's subtle. It starts with a feeling that something no longer fits the way it used to. You begin to notice it in small moments. Conversations that feel empty, habits that feel dull, environments that drain you instead of grounding you. You don't hate them, you've just outgrown them. And that realization creates tension, because familiarity is comforting even when it limits you. The old version of you helped you survive. It made sense once. It protected you. It got you through a certain chapter of life. But survival is not the same as fulfillment. And what once kept you safe can eventually keep you small. Outgrowing an identity feels like loss. You grieve the person you were, the routines that felt easy, the relationships that made sense back then. Growth doesn't just add new things to your life. It removes old ones. And removal is painful even when it's necessary. You may feel guilt for changing, for wanting more, for no longer fitting into spaces that once felt like home. You worry about disappointing people, about being misunderstood, about being alone. That fear is real, and it's part of the process. Belonging feels good, but belonging without growth becomes stagnation. You cannot become who you're meant to be while clinging to who you were. Evolution requires separation, not rejection. Separation. Some people will not grow with you, not because they are bad, but because they are comfortable where they are. Your growth challenges their stillness. Your change reflects their avoidance. And that makes distance inevitable. This is where many people stop. Not because they lack ability, but because they fear disconnection. They choose familiarity over evolution. They stay smaller to stay accepted. And over time, that choice breeds resentment toward themselves. Becoming requires courage. The courage to be misunderstood. The courage to walk alone for a while. The courage to let go of identities that no longer align with your values. Growth is not loud. It is lonely before it is empowering. You may feel like you're betraying your past self, but you're not. You're honoring them by continuing the journey they started. The past version of you did the best they could with what they knew. Now you know more, and knowing more demands change. Comfort is seductive because it's predictable. Growth is uncertain. You don't know exactly who you'll become. You don't know what you'll lose. You don't know who will stay. But certainty is not the price of meaning. Courage is. Outgrowing yourself requires honesty. You stop pretending that things are fine when they aren't. You stop performing roles that no longer reflect who you are. You stop shrinking to maintain harmony. That honesty disrupts the familiar, but it builds integrity. There is a quiet strength that emerges when you stop trying to belong everywhere. You become more selective, more intentional. You choose alignment over approval, and that choice changes your posture. You stand differently, you speak differently, you decide differently. Growth requires space. Space from old patterns, old habits, old narratives. You cannot build a new identity in the same environment that reinforced the old one. Something has to change. Sometimes that something is internal. Sometimes it's external. Often it's both. You may feel like you're losing parts of yourself, but what you're really losing are constraints, labels, expectations that no longer fit. What remains is more real, more grounded, more aligned. This is the crossing point, the moment where going back feels impossible, but going forward feels uncertain. The middle is uncomfortable. You're no longer who you were, but not yet who you're becoming. That in-between space is where growth accelerates. Don't rush through it. Don't numb it. Let it shape you. Let it teach you discernment. Let it teach you self-respect. The discomfort you feel is the cost of expansion. You are not abandoning people by growing. You are choosing yourself. And choosing yourself is not selfish when it's done with integrity. It's necessary. You cannot pour from an identity that no longer exists. Some connections will fall away naturally. Some will require intentional distance. Not every relationship is meant to last forever. Some are seasonal. Some are transitional. Some were meant to teach you something and then end. Releasing what no longer fits creates space for what does. New relationships, new environments, new opportunities. But only if you're willing to let go first. Growth requires empty hands. Outgrowing who you used to be is not about erasing your past. It's about integrating it, taking what worked, leaving what didn't, carrying wisdom forward without dragging old limitations with you. You may feel alone at times, but loneliness is temporary. Integrity lasts, and the version of you that emerges from this process is stronger, clearer, and more grounded. Becoming is not comfortable, but it is honest. And honesty is the foundation of meaning. When you align your life with who you are becoming, direction stabilizes. This chapter is not about loss. It's about transition, about crossing from familiarity into truth, about releasing what was to make room for what will be. You are not losing yourself. You are meeting yourself at a higher level. And once you cross this point, there is no going back, only forward. Chapter 12, The Quiet Confidence of a Directed Life. There is a moment when something inside you settles, not loudly, not dramatically, just quietly. The constant urgency fades. The restless questioning softens. You're no longer searching every corner of your life for reassurance. Direction has taken root, and with it comes a different kind of confidence. Not the kind that announces itself, the kind that holds steady. A directed life doesn't feel rushed. It feels grounded. You're no longer chasing every opportunity or comparing every outcome. You know what matters to you, and that clarity filters everything else. Anxiety loses its edge because you're not scattered anymore. Your energy has a place to go, Before direction, your confidence depended on feedback, on approval, on how others responded to you. A good day meant praise, a bad day meant doubt. You were emotionally exposed to the world's reactions. But internal certainty changes that dynamic. You stop outsourcing your worth. Quiet confidence comes from alignment, from knowing your actions match your values, from trusting your process even when results are slow. You don't need to prove yourself constantly because you're living in agreement with yourself. Comparison fades when direction is clear. Other people's success no longer feels threatening. It becomes irrelevant, not because you're better, but because you're focused. You stop measuring your life against timelines that don't belong to you. You move at your own pace with intention. A directed life simplifies decisions. You no longer weigh every option equally. You filter choices through your standards. Does this align? Does this support what I'm building? If not, the answer is simple. That simplicity creates peace. You notice the difference in how you carry yourself. Your posture changes, your voice steadies. You don't rush to explain or justify. You don't need to win every conversation. You're not defensive. You're anchored. This confidence is not loud because it doesn't need to be. It's built on consistency, not performance. On follow-through, not talk. You know what you're capable of because you've proven it to yourself quietly over time. When challenges arise, you don't panic. You assess. You respond. You adapt. Direction gives you context. Problems no longer feel like threats to your identity. They're just obstacles on a path you chose. The calm you feel is earned. It comes from discipline, from responsibility, from endurance, from cutting distractions, from building structure, from outgrowing what no longer fit. All of it compounds into stability. A directed life doesn't mean life is easy. It means life is coherent. Effort makes sense. Sacrifice has purpose. You're willing to endure discomfort because you know why you're doing it. Internal certainty replaces the need for constant reassurance. You don't need to check if you're doing okay. You know, because your days reflect your priorities. Your habits reflect your values. That alignment is reassuring. You begin to trust silence. You don't fill every gap with noise. You're comfortable being alone with your thoughts because they're no longer chaotic. They're organized by direction. This kind of confidence grows slowly. It doesn't spike. It settles. And once it's there, it's difficult to shake. External chaos doesn't penetrate as deeply. Opinions don't sway you as easily. You stop performing for approval. You stop chasing validation. You act because it's right, not because it's noticed. That shift is liberating. It frees energy you didn't know you were spending. Peace is not the absence of ambition. It's ambition without desperation. You still want more. You still work hard, but you're not frantic. You're focused. A directed life feels solid under pressure. When things go wrong, you don't collapse. You don't spiral. You rely on your systems, your standards, your identity. That reliability is calming. You become selective with your time, with your energy, with your commitments, not out of arrogance, but out of respect for what you're building. Direction makes your boundaries clearer. This quiet confidence affects your relationships. You listen more. You react less. You're not trying to impress. You're present. That presence deepens connection. You don't need to convince anyone of your worth. You're too busy living it. And that detachment from approval paradoxically earns respect. The anxiety that once followed you everywhere now visits occasionally, but it doesn't stay. It no longer defines you. Direction gives you perspective. You know where you're headed, even if the road curves. You trust the process you're in, not blindly, but intentionally. You know why you chose it. That knowledge stabilizes you. A directed life doesn't eliminate uncertainty. It teaches you to live with it calmly. You stop demanding guarantees. You focus on effort, on alignment, on consistency. This confidence is quiet because it doesn't seek attention. It seeks depth. It grows in silence, in routine, in repetition, in follow-through. You feel less urgency to escape your life because your life feels intentional. You're not waiting for something to start. You're already in motion. This is what meaning feels like. Not excitement every day, but steadiness, clarity, calm strength. And once you experience this, you don't want to go back. Because chaos is loud, but direction is peaceful, and peace is powerful. You've built something inside that can't be taken away easily. That's the quiet confidence of a directed life. Chapter 13, Meaning is a lifelong practice. Meaning is not something you arrive at and keep forever. It is not a finish line you cross and relax behind. Meaning is a practice, a daily alignment between who you are and how you live. The moment you treat it like a destination, it starts slipping away. Most people are trained to think in outcomes, goals, milestones, achievements. They believe meaning will finally appear once something is completed, once they arrive somewhere, once they prove something. But when the goal is reached, the feeling fades and confusion returns. Not because the goal was wrong, but because meaning was misunderstood. Goals give direction, but they cannot carry meaning alone. Meaning comes from how you live while pursuing them, from the standards you keep, from the discipline you maintain, from the identity you embody day after day. Meaning lives in process, not in completion. Finish line thinking creates pressure. It turns life into a race instead of a practice. You rush, you strain, you postpone peace until later. But later never arrives the way you imagine. Meaning does not wait for perfection. It grows in alignment. Daily alignment is quieter, less dramatic, but more powerful. It asks a simple question each day. Did my actions reflect my values today? That question grounds you. It keeps meaning stable, regardless of external results. When meaning becomes a practice, it stops being fragile. It's no longer dependent on success, recognition, or progress curves. You don't lose it when things slow down. You don't question it when obstacles appear. You carry it with you because it's built into how you live. This shift changes your relationship with effort. You stop chasing constant validation. You stop measuring every day by output alone. You measure it by integrity, by consistency, by presence. That measurement builds calm. Meaning as a practice also removes desperation. You're no longer trying to squeeze fulfillment out of one achievement. You find fulfillment in showing up aligned, in doing what matters repeatedly. That repetition builds depth. You begin to understand that direction is not something you follow. It's something you are. It lives in your habits, your standards, your boundaries. Direction becomes identity when your choices reflect it naturally. A meaningful life doesn't require constant intensity. It requires continuity. Showing up when it's ordinary, when it's quiet, when no one is watching. Those moments matter more than milestones. When meaning is practiced daily, setbacks don't threaten you. They inform you, you adjust without collapsing. You continue without spiraling. Because your sense of purpose is not tied to immediate outcomes. This grounded approach creates sustainability. You don't burn out chasing fulfillment. You don't lose yourself in achievement. You remain connected to why you're doing what you're doing. Meaning also expands when it's practiced. It deepens, it matures, it evolves with you. What mattered in one season may change in another. And that's not failure, that's growth. Daily alignment keeps you honest. It ensures that progress doesn't pull you away from yourself. Meaning without alignment is hollow. Alignment keeps it real. You stop asking if your life matters. You know it does because you live it intentionally. That knowing is stabilizing. It quiets doubt. It replaces urgency with steadiness. When direction becomes identity, motivation becomes less important. You act because it's who you are, not because you're chasing a feeling. That consistency builds trust in yourself. Meaning as a practice also changes how you rest. Rest becomes restoration, not escape. You rest to return aligned, not to avoid discomfort. That distinction protects your energy. You don't need to constantly reinvent yourself. You need to recommit daily. Small recommitments compound. They keep you grounded even as life changes. A practice meaning makes you resilient. When things fall apart externally, you remain intact internally. You don't lose yourself because you're not outsourcing your sense of purpose. You begin to see life as something you participate in fully, not something you wait to enjoy later. Meaning stops being conditional. It becomes present. You focus on alignment today. Tomorrow takes care of itself. Direction unfolds through lived integrity. You are no longer chasing meaning. You are maintaining it, practicing it, reinforcing it through action. That maintenance is what keeps it alive. Meaning practice daily becomes a stabilizing force. It carries you through uncertainty. It grounds you through change. It reminds you who you are when the world feels loud. This is what maturity feels like. Not constant excitement, but quiet confidence. Not certainty about everything, but clarity about what matters. When direction becomes identity, life stops feeling fragile. You stop fearing loss of purpose. Because purpose lives in how you live, not in what you achieve. You don't need a new goal to feel alive. You need alignment. And alignment is available every day. Meaning is not behind you. It is not ahead of you. It is practiced now, in this moment, in this choice. This is the final shift, from chasing purpose to embodying it, from direction as a plan to direction as a way of being. And when you live this way, meaning stops slipping away. It stays with you, steady, grounded, enduring. Final chapter, you are no longer lost. You didn't arrive here by accident. You didn't stay through this journey because it was entertaining or comfortable. You stayed because something in you was ready to change. And now, if you pause and look back, you can see the distance you've traveled, not outwardly, but inwardly. The person who began this audiobook was searching, restless, pulled in too many directions. The person standing here now is different. Before, your life felt scattered. You were busy but unsure, moving but not anchored. You questioned yourself constantly, compared endlessly, waited for clarity to arrive from somewhere outside of you. You were hoping for permission, for certainty, for something to tell you who to be. That search was exhausting. Now something has settled. You may not have every answer, but you have direction. And direction changes everything. It turns noise into signal. It turns chaos into structure. It turns anxiety into focus. You no longer feel lost because you're no longer waiting to be found. You've learned that meaning is not discovered through luck or motivation. It's built through discipline, responsibility, endurance, and alignment. You've learned that direction doesn't come from perfect plans. It comes from standards, from daily choices, from identity. You don't move the same way anymore. You're not rushing to keep up. You're not desperate to prove yourself. You're not chasing every distraction that calls your name. You know what matters, and that knowing has weight. The calm you feel now is earned. It's not ignorance. It's not avoidance. It's the calm of someone who trusts themselves, someone who knows they can handle discomfort, someone who no longer runs from effort. That calm is strength. You stopped waiting for life to feel meaningful and started living meaningfully. You stopped searching for purpose and started practicing it. You stopped outsourcing your direction and took ownership of it. That ownership changed your posture, your presence, your decisions. You are self-led now, not because everything is easy, but because you've chosen to lead yourself regardless. You don't need constant reassurance. You don't need perfect conditions. You don't need permission. You act because it aligns with who you are becoming. There will still be uncertainty. There will still be challenges. Growth doesn't end here, but you face the future differently now. You face it with intention instead of fear, with structure instead of chaos, with commitment instead of hesitation. You understand now that being lost was never a flaw. It was a signal that you had outgrown a life without direction. And instead of numbing that signal, you listened to it. You responded with action, with honesty, with courage. Direction is no longer something you chase, it's something you carry. It lives in your habits, your boundaries, your daily structure, your standards. No one can take it from you because it's built into how you live. This is the quiet power of a directed life. You don't announce it, you demonstrate it. Through consistency, through restraint, through follow-through, you let your actions speak. You no longer need to escape your life. You're building one you respect, one that reflects your values, one that feels solid beneath your feet. That respect creates confidence, and that confidence creates peace. From here on, The work is simple but not easy. Live deliberately, every day. Choose alignment over comfort. Choose effort over excuses. Choose depth over distraction. These choices will not always feel exciting, but they will always feel right. You don't need to apologize for becoming more focused, more disciplined, more intentional. Growth may distance you from some things. Let it. What aligns will stay. What doesn't was never meant to come with you. Remember this, direction is not fragile. It doesn't disappear when things get hard. It strengthens when you show up anyway. Keep practicing it. Keep reinforcing it. Keep choosing it. You are no longer lost because you are no longer drifting. You are building, you are becoming, you are leading yourself. And that is the foundation of a meaningful life. Walk forward with calm authority, with quiet confidence, with deliberate intention. This is your life. Live it on purpose.